Welcome, good morning, good evening, um, depending where you are from. Thank you for joining with us today. My name is Aziza, Project and Research Officer at Southern Voice. Today, I will be moderating our discussion on financing for development and global crisis development in a shifting global landscape. Before we start, I would like to request everyone to please mute themselves. We will have an interactive session later. If you wanna discuss together, talk with our panelists, feel free to do so at the interactive session later towards the end of the event. So before we start, I would like to invite Margarita Gomez, the Executive Director of Southern Voice, to do the welcome remarks. Margarita?
Thank you so much, Asisa. And it's great to see all of you, very familiar faces, new faces joining today. I'm going to be very brief. And the main, what I want to share is the reason of creating this space and this platform for a conversation, a dialogue. We know that there are many changes happening in the global development landscape, and there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of conversations that needs to happen, and we want to create a space where Global South researchers, policymakers, practitioners can come together and can have conversations with also our colleagues and partners from the Global North to really position our priorities, to start to have a common narrative and and identify our priorities. And that's the reason what we have created these Southern Voice Talks. Is going to be a series. The first edition is focused on our Global South perspective, which is a publication that brings together local solutions, local evidence to global debates and global challenges. And today we are going to talk about the follow-up of the Financing for Development Conference, connected with some of the inputs and insights that our colleagues from the GSP, the Global South Perspective, have written in the publication. It is a pleasure to have all of you here, and we are so much looking forward to this conversation and to start and to create and make of this platform a really a space of very honest exchange, very honest conversations, and to create a dialogue within all of us and also with our global partners. Thank you, everybody, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Margarita, for the welcoming remarks. The topic we're discussing today is both timely and urgent, where we're building on the recent FFD4 conference in Seville and Southern Voice important positioning to advance the financing for development agenda. At the heart of the conversation is a critical need of expanding fiscal space for countries to fund essential services like health, education, and many more. We'll explore this through debt relief, tax reform, and multilateral development bank reform. It is urgent because, on top of declining aid, Global South countries are facing debt crisis, where countries spend more for debt repayment than for funding public services such as healthcare access or education, and many more. Today, we will highlight solutions shaped by the unique context of the Global South, contributing to FFD4's objectives to boost investment in sustainable development and address the debt crisis facing the world's poorest countries. I am delighted to introduce our distinguished panel. So we're joined by two authors of the GSP article, Lakmini Fernando from the Institute of Policy Studies in Sri Lanka, and also Dr. Denine Hitler from the Center for Population and Environmental Development in Nigeria. Thank you both so much for joining us, and congratulations on your important work. Looking forward to the discussion today. And we are also honored to have two expert commentators with us, Julie Garfield Kofod, as the Senior Director for Sustainable Development of the United Nations Foundation, and also Aline Conti Castro as the Coordinator for International Financing for Sustainable Development from IPEA, Brazil. Thank you both for bringing your insights and expertise to this session. Welcome again. Before we continue, the next step is where I'll briefly outline how we'll proceed today. So we'll begin with a 10-minute presentation of the paper by Lakmini and Denine. Following that, Julie and Aline will respond to the presentation, sharing their perspectives from the field and also their insights. We'll then move to an interactive session using Menti and open up for your questions before we conclude. Without further delay, let's begin the next session. Our first speaker today is Lakmini Fernando from Institute of Policy Studies, Sri Lanka. You have 5 minutes, Lakmini. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Southern Voice, for this amazing opportunity. So I'll start my presentation with the global challenge that I addressed in my paper. So increasing indebtedness is marking the beginning of a new debt crisis. And in 1996, the World Bank and IMF launched the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative to reduce unsustainable debt in poor countries. However, again, debt in developing countries is increasing. In 2023, global public debt reached $97 trillion, and 30% of this debt is coming from developing countries. High debt levels reduce economic growth and increase risk of debt default, as we have already observed in countries like Sri Lanka, my own country, and in Zambia. Debt is considered sustainable only when a country can finance both its development policy objectives and repay its debt. It has been long argued that unfairness in the global financial system as one of the key drivers of debt accumulation in developing countries. Therefore, in my paper, I am focusing on how the global financial system should be transformed in order to ensure sustainable debt management in the global south. And when it comes to main contributions, I have two main contributions. First, it provides an update in debt thresholds in developing countries across several heterogeneities. This includes by geographic location, income, and governance quality. And then this study highlights the importance of creating an unbiased global financial system in order to facilitate increased non-debt creating alternative financial options to the developing countries. And this includes improved taxation, increased flow of official development assistance, and attracting innovative financial instruments to replace the need for new borrowing. And in terms of why I chose this particular research for my paper is that out of the 54 countries in default risk, it is observed that majority are coming from the global south. And as I have already mentioned, the unfairness in the global financial architecture is identified as one of the key drivers for this high debt accumulation. So if you looked at the IMF debt sustainability analysis, the DAC, it is a tool that we are using to resolve potential debt crises. However, it has its own limitations, such as it provides overly optimistic post-pandemic economic recovery projections, and it has unfair burden sharing among debtors and creditors, and it ignores the political economic factors which undermine DSA's effectiveness. So also growth impacts of debt vary based on the debt composition and the level, and these factors also not included in DSAs. So another reason is that developing countries have received limited financial assistance in times of crisis. For instance, in 2021, IMF allocated $160 billion in emergency assistance for the European Union, while Africa received only $34 billion. And when it comes to the most relevant findings in my research, first it is that we can use the debt threshold. This is the safe level of debt that a country can maintain without getting into debt default. We can use this debt threshold as a complementary tool to prevent unsustainable debt accumulation. And in my study, I have found significant debt thresholds for Latin America and the Caribbean region, low-income countries, and countries with poor governance quality. Then, in order to reduce the reliance on borrowing, we are proposing that we need to consider more on non-debt financial mechanisms, such as the improved taxation, ODAs, and the innovative financial instruments. In terms of limitations, what I can say is that we are observing that private creditors are playing a significant role in current debt accumulation in developing countries. However, in our estimation, we have not considered this variation in debt composition. So in future research, which considered these debt composition various will be giving a much accurate debt threshold for the countries in perspective. And when it comes to the key recommendations, my study highlights the importance of creating a robust global financial system. So in order to that supports debt sustainability in the global south. So one of the key recommendation is to maintain debt at safe threshold in order to prevent unsustainable debt build-up, because these debt threshold can be used as complementary tool alongside debt sustainability analysis of the IMF, because DSA is approved only if a country is within the IMF program, and it take a long time. So if we can use these debt thresholds, it may help the countries to keep their debt in check. And second, we need to understand that as development policy makers, these borrowed money should be used only for productive investments that addresses the development priorities of a particular country. And what I understand from my country experience is most of the time borrowed money is using to refinance the debt repayments or recurrent expenditures. And finally, in terms of global southern countries, we need to understand it is very important to build the capacity and fund country-specific research in order to help these countries to manage their debt at sustainable levels without waiting for the last minute, because the cost is too high for recovery. Thank you so much again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Lakmini, for sharing your research. Thank you. Now, the next one is going to be our second presenter, which is Dr. Denine Hitlar from Center for Population and Environmental Development in Nigeria. You will have 5 minutes, Denine. You can start now. Thank you.
Okay, a wonderful day to everyone. Our topic is on earth equity in crisis or during shocks. The focus is to build resilient communities in global south during crisis period. Now, experiencing of crisis or shocks is a global challenge, but although there is inequity, earth inequity across between the global north and the global south, during crisis, this is being widened. Crisis situation widen the earth equity in these global south communities. For example, in Nigeria, due to the conflict, we experienced 2 million displaced. Then in Nepal, due to the earthquake, 84% facility is being damaged. And then in Brazil, due to the Zika virus outbreak, we have microcephaly cases 3,700, and during that period, Brazil experienced inequity coefficient of 53.4. Now, what we did is that we exploit case studies of works in these three countries. We try to find out what activity during this crisis period help the communities to build resilience. And one of the key strategies that we use is that before we are going to adopt a particular strategy as being capable noteworthy of helping us to build resilience in health system during crisis. It has to occur in 2 or 3 countries. So with that analysis, with our review of over 22 literature, we were able to come up with these evidence-based solutions that worked. We find that community engagement helped to increase maternal health care through local involvement. This was particularly in Brazil and in Nigeria. So we also find out that inclusion of mental health care in a culturally tailored psychosocial support system is essential during crisis period. And then we also find out that utilization of local structures is also very, very key, as we see the involvement of social structures, informal insurance system that could help the people to cope. And we also, especially in the case of Brazil, find out that inclusion of mobile technology improve surveillance efficiency. And then the next key finding that we have is flexible health system maintain essential services. And then lastly, effort to ensure that there is equity also can lead to coverage of, can lead to reduction of mortality. Now, in key terms, my time is almost, I have only 1 minute. Now, in key term, what we find out from the paper is that instead of using a top-down approach, which most cases when there is crisis, Global North and other funders will come into a community that have crisis and begin to implement. We recommend that the local community is engaged and the local resources are used, and also that mental health services are included into this program, so that the communities will be able to pick up easily. Because if you come in with your structures, you will find out that with the moment you leave, there will be a vacuum. So the recovery will not be quick. So our key contribution, this analysis happened to be one of the first attempt to explore health promotion in crisis period, with a view to developing a roadmap for evidence-based, community-driven resilience interventions. So these are some of the things that we find in our paper. And my time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Denine. Very insightful papers, both of yours and Lakmini as well. And then we are moving to the next part of the talk, where we will gain insight from our commentators based on their expertise. Before we start, I would also like to remind and encourage everyone to share their thoughts and questions already on the Zoom chat box. We will address them later during the Q&A session, but feel free to share your thoughts and questions while the discussion is happening. Now I am inviting Julie from the UN Foundation to respond to the presentation given by both Lakmini and Denine. Please, Julie, you have 7.5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asisa. Thank you so much for having me as well today. First, I want to say that both of the research papers were incredibly interesting reads. I'll try to address a couple of points that are squarely within my expertise, which is focused on the international arena at large. So this session is meant to be connected to the outcomes of the F54 conference. But I think that there are a few steps before that that are important to raise. So why is this so important was one of the first questions that we were asked. Why is it essential to bring in perspectives from the Global South? And of course, the Financing for Development conference that was held in Seville in June, July this year comes 15 years after the conference in Addis Ababa that laid the foundation for the implementing principles around financing for development that would ensure an implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals that were agreed just a couple of months after the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. And this is central to keep in mind, that the global to-do list is still centered around, the global to-do list on development is still centered around the Sustainable Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Agenda. And what's crucial here, of course, is that we are largely off track, more than halfway into the agenda. We now have just 5 years left until 2030. And I'm sure that many of you would have heard over the last couple of years, if not more, that we are only at this point on track with about 17 or 18% of the targets, that we have data of the 169 different targets under the 17 goals. And so there's a huge deficit in implementation. Some of that has to do with financing, but other issues, such as the ones that you've outlined in the concept note, are for sure also at play. Both issues related to international climate crises, the pandemic, increased peace and security issues, and so forth. And so it's important, I think, to just keep the SDGs in mind, to keep the central task at the front of mind for the exercise, and also understand that this is a global agenda. Where we have the MDGs that was focused really on the developing world, this is a all engaged sort of agenda where both the global north and the global south are meant to come together to achieve these goals that we've set out for ourselves. Adjacently, we've also in recent years had an adoption of the Pact for the Future that layered in additional goals that would set us on track to have a more sustainable multilateral space to achieve these different goals. And so it's on the back of both of those different processes that the F54 process in June, July came about. And there's a few things that I just wanted to say about that. First of all, I think that the outcome document signified an important win for multilateralism in the sense that we were able to come together to agree a very important document that dealt with issues related to debt sustainability, domestic resource mobilization, innovative financial mechanisms, and so forth. And so in that context, the Global South perspectives were a driving force in achieving a very ambitious outcome. If it hadn't been for groupings like GEOSIS and the African group, there's, in my mind, no question that we wouldn't have reached as far as we got in that particular outcome document. And of course, research papers and perspectives like the ones that we've seen presented today are really important in that context. So that's the first point that I wanted to make. The other point is about why these solutions are really interesting in this particular context for achievement of the F54 goals. And I think both of the research papers are examples of, one, how do you reform the system, but then also two, how do you spend resources from a reformed system in order to achieve the SDGs, which again is our central to-do list across the globe. So really important to have these very sort of specific, country-specific scenarios that can then build up into the international arena for these conversations. The third point is the consciousness about the bridge between the national and the regional and international advocacy levels. And this really speaks to how to make these solutions and contributions actionable. And so there are particular opportunities that will come up ahead. We've now concluded the conversations around F54. We have the outcome document. But as many would have heard, this is not the end. It's much more the beginning of a longer trek of how we now implement this outcome document. And so specifically related to the first research paper on debt sustainability, that really became the heart and soul of the conversations in the lead up to the adoption of the document in Seville. And so a huge emphasis was placed throughout on debt sustainability and a reform of that particular system. And there are a few issues in the outcome document that I think are important to highlight here. One is the reference to the principles on responsible borrowing and lending, of which we've had a previous iteration that one of the UN agencies, UNCTAD, have worked on before, but there's now a renewed emphasis on an updating and further expansion of those principles. And the particular issues discussed in that research paper by Lakmini, I think, are central to those conversations that will be picked up in the coming year. Another issue is the reference to an intergovernmental process on bridging the gaps in the current sustainable debt conversations. And so that means that in the coming year or years, an intergovernmental process will be established that could lead to conversations around binding or non-binding principles around debt structure, debt architecture reform. And so this particular research paper is really ripe for plugging into that particular conversation. And so that's ties in specifically to my point about bridging the national and regional and international conversations around advocacy, because largely you will have a discrepancy in what's being pushed at the national level and what makes it into the international conversations. And I think that's where the UN Foundation plays an important role. And I would just like to offer, up our openness to engage, of course, with Southern Voice, as we are already doing, but also with all of you in relaying some of the information that is central to how you really push these ideas at the international level to make it into these conversations and into the final documents. Because often all of that evidence-based research and all of that good knowledge that is coming from the ground up, as mentioned in one of the papers, doesn't really make it into the conversations in New York and elsewhere. And so those two processes coming up ahead would be very, very ripe for a plug-in on the conversations around the debt threshold and the DSAs. And there's a couple of other things, and I know my time is up, so maybe we can come back to that in the Q&A, but there is really a strengthened sort of international system, or at least the foundation for a strengthened international system that has come out of FFP4. Some of it is centered in New York, but others is also centered in the regions via the MDBs, but also the regional commissions and so forth. And so there's lots, I think, to play with to bring these national perspectives, all of this research into the bigger conversations where you can push the negotiations and the member states to make decisions that are really, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but that are really meaningful, where the changes has a particular impact that's grounded in some of this really good research. And so I'll stop there because I'm already over time, but much more to say on the specificities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your insights. We can get back to you again in the Q&A session. Moving on to the next one, I'm inviting Aline to respond to the presentations. Please, Aline, you have 7.5 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity of being here today to reflect on two important works that, although focusing on different spheres, are deeply connected by a common search for sustainable and inclusive development in the Global South. Let me begin with the analysis on global financial governance and debt sustainability. The paper makes a crucial point. Robust institutions and sound governance are not simply desirable. They are essential to sustaining economic growth. Without them, financial reforms remain fragile and our capacity to channel resources into development is compromised. The text also calls for expanding non-debt financial mechanisms, more effective taxation systems, enhanced official development assistance, stronger South-South cooperation, and foreign direct investment aligned with development priorities. We must also ask, what exactly are we financing now? We must define the kind of development we want and ensure our debt and investment choices reflect that vision. Debt debates must also consider the balance of payments. We have to remember, especially in Latin America, this is very important. Even low debt can be risky if foreign currency inflows are unstable or if structural deficits persist. And we must be clear, reforms in global financial governance will not happen by policy design alone. They require political coalitions, regional mechanisms, and sustainable willpower. In Brazil, we have had some successes: a historic reduction of external debt, repayment of debt through the IMF, stronger reserves, and a strengthened development bank, BNDES, as an engine for long-term investment. But maintaining this balance now is harder in today's turbulent global context. Attempts to extend this model to South America, such as the Bank of the South, Banco del Sur, failed due to disagreements over governance rules. The contrast with Argentina is striking: large external debt, persistent financial outflows, and weakened national banks. So implementing the text's proposals calls for stronger financial articulation in South-South cooperation. The Seville commitment gives us a framework, important framework. We also need deeper links among the regional institutions, CELAC, Mercosur, ASEAN, African Union, and other regional platforms to coordinate financing, share experience, and amplify our negotiating power globally. But now the second text, turning to the work on health equity in crisis, it reminds us of something vital: the necessity of improving people's lives. The authors emphasize community mobilization as essential for both access and justice in health, especially under crisis. Interventions must respect cultural realities, and community action is the backbone of health system resilience. We could add that we must also strengthen institutional structures for participation, with formal channels for communities to influence policy. None of this is possible without sustainable public investment in health, not just in emergencies, but as a permanent commitment. Brazil can be, as I am speaking from Brazil, I think that Brazil offers some lessons. Our unified health system, SUS, is a very important public health system and provides universal coverage with decentralized governance. So the family health strategy that's mentioned in the text, but we have other programs like More Doctors, Mais Médicos, and the Popular Pharmacy program also. They brought care closer to those who need it most. It's not perfect, but we are trying hard to make it better. Health councils at all levels give citizens also a voice. But we face municipal inequalities in resources and capacity. So strengthening local management, municipal management, and participation is crucial. We must also reinforce the health economic industrial complex, our ability to produce medicines, vaccines, and equipment, and expand international health cooperation within the South-South framework. Here too, the Seville commitment aligns, ensuring resources reach communities directly, and allocation is socially inclusive. To conclude, both authors are talking about resilience. Resilience about financial systems and governance that can withstand shocks without sacrificing development goals, and resilience about health systems and communities that endure crises without abandoning equity. Both require sustained investment, coordination, and political will. For the Global South, there are some interlinked strategies. One, align financial governance with social priorities, debt, taxation, and investment, but must be linked with their social goal. And second, build cross-regional coalitions, so integrating CELAC, Mercosur, ASEAN, African Union, others, and other regional organisms into platforms for financing and cooperation. 3, invest in health as a foundation for development. And 4, empower communities as agents of resilience, giving them resources, knowledge, and political voice. So the Seville commitment can guide us, channeling resources where they are most needed, ensuring inclusivity, and fostering cooperation based on partnership. In the end, bridging the worlds of global finance and community health is not just possible, but it's very necessary. Financial sustainability without social equity is hollow, and health equity without financial sustainability is fragile. So our challenge and our opportunity is to build both together. I think for now that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Aline. That was really insightful. I have a couple of keywords that I heard from both of you, Julie and Aline, including intergovernment collaboration, also strengthen formal channel for policy, investment in health, ensuring inclusivity. Yeah, that is really, really insightful. The next session, we're gonna have an interactive session where we hope to gain active participation from everyone. This question is where I want you to reflect, and we want to hear your thoughts on what is needed but not yet being discussed to move financing development forward. You can reflect this from what you already know, from the presentation from GSP authors today, also from the commentators' insights. We're gonna wait here for 1.5 minutes. There's a QR code for you to scan, or you can also click the link in the chat box to open the question in your browser. Maybe we can already start seeing the messages coming in Menti. We'll wait for a couple of minutes more, and then we'll start with the discussion of the response. All right. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. I am seeing a couple of very interesting response, such as gendered impact of debt burden. Also, Can you scroll down, please? Okay, sorry, scroll up. Coordination of national, regional, and global. This is also something that Julie was highlighting, that there will be some discrepancies between what is being prioritized at the national level, regional, and global. And role of civil society. That is pretty interesting. It is related actually with what Denine was presenting on the role of community in addressing global challenges. And then, okay, I feel concerned that we are not discussing reparations from colonial. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your insights. I would like to invite Julie, Denine, Aline, and Lakmini, if you have any response to those menti shared.
Oh, okay. Can I go on?
Sure.
Yes, I want to. There's a question I saw on the message. Okay, it's a question. I say, in your research, were you able to see mechanisms the community or the state has to document or preserve, and also ideally scale these successful community experiences? It is a shame if this practical knowledge get lost over time and can be used in future crises and in others. So what I want to say in response to this is that what we did in our research is those that were, of course, there were some of these interventions that were not properly documented. We only captured those that get into the publication phase, right? So those that were documented, we do know that there are some, a good number of them that were not published, so we can get access to them. So data loss is part of an integral capacity building need that communities need, so that whatever system that communities implement in response to their shocks or in their everyday struggle to ensure health equity will be readily available for researchers to be able to harness. So it's a mechanism for preserving them is key, but we rely on only those that are readily available at the moment. Those were the ones that we used and we analyzed.
Hello?
Hello,
Dr.
was
Den?
I audible? Was I audible?
I think we lost you for a bit, yes?
I do not know exactly where I. Okay,
It's
in a nutshell,
yeah.
in a nutshell, what I was trying to say is that yes, we do acknowledge that there were some innovative, there may have been some innovative experiences that community may have implemented with, but they were not properly documented. So having a documentary system at the community level is also a key thing that they need to do. But however, we relied on those that were documented and published, and those were the ones that we analyzed and presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deninia, for your response. I'm seeing on my screen now that debt servicing burden gender perspective is not yet being discussed to move financing development forward. Lakmini, would you like to respond to that one?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Asisa. Even I was wondering when it comes to like gender perspective, it is not covered even in my paper. But when it comes to developing countries, even in my country, Sri Lanka, gender perspective, looking at policies in a gender lens is somewhat, a hidden priority. However, in my country, when it comes to education, women are the most educated. But when it comes to job market, Female labor force participation rate is around 30 to 35%, whereas it is 65%. So about reducing the debt or the climate change, it is most vulnerable. One of the groups that are most vulnerable is women. However, gender does not include only women, it includes some other aspects as well. However, I really feel interested in this area, and if we can look into this area, I mean the gender perspective of debt servicing, I think for southern developing countries in this southern global south, there are that we can like tap the missing potential, because although at the international and regional level these are coming as policy priorities, when it comes to actual national level planning and policy making, our priorities are very different. And if you look at the like public investment programs or the national budgets, the amounts that we are allocating is very low. So although our problems are there, and we are talking at the conferences and everywhere, when it comes to implementation, we need investment. Without investment, we can't do the projects. So if we can push forward the national governments, the policy makers, to think about these aspects critically and include them not only as like slogans or to like showcase in conferences or wherever they are going, but when it comes to actual implementation, if we can take these into like more into the academic, I mean the not only in the like policymakers levels, but when it comes to like from the beginning, like from the education level, we need to get these things into perspective. And through that, I think if looking at the developed countries and developing countries, the numbers variation, if we can bring these gender perspective more into the whatever the thing that we are doing, I think Global South can do a lot in future as well. So that's my idea on this one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lakmini, for your response. I have I have this one as well on my screen. The response is saying that there needs to be more national and international private sector engagement, including local private foundations. What do you think about that, Julie?
Thanks so much. I mean, I just wanted to piggyback a bit off of what Lakmini was just saying about the prioritization in national budgets on particular issues such as gender mainstreaming and so forth, and couple that with a couple of the questions that I see in the chat on the UN system's ability to push this. What are some of the issues that can fast track the implementation of the SDGs? And I wanted to highlight two particular frameworks. One is the 6 key transitions that has been developed in the context of the latest SDG summit in 23, and then the following summit for the future that I mentioned at the outset. And that really builds on research that was put together in the Global Sustainable Development Report that outlines the conclusions of all research done and implementations of the SDGs and what really can fast track these different efforts. And it's focused on a particular set of entry points and levers. And if you translate that into a more UN-y speech or framework, these 6 key transitions, you will have an emphasis on food systems, on energy access and affordability, on digital connectivity, education, jobs and social protection, and last but definitely not least, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. So that's a bit of a simplified framework of the 17 goals and 6 key transitions where investment is needed. So again, this is about where the investment is flowing, both at a national level, but also internationally, both from private sector foundations and via official development assistance. And building on all of this research, where I know Southern Voice researchers have been involved in the development of the Global Sustainable Development Report as well, this is the outcome. This is the best possible plan to focus on the implementation obstacles and hurdles and really fast track progress across all of the SDGs instead of a more sort of siloed approach. And so that's a really good framework that sometimes gets lost because, of course, the global goals, the 17, very colorful wheels and so forth is what's known. But this is really a great framework to push this forward. And cross-cutting to this, of course, is the financing. These are investment opportunities, and cross-cutting is the financing for development, but also gender. Gender is cross-cutting across all of these different things that you would see as laid out in that 6 key transition framework. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then I think some of the points that was raised in the Menti around colonialism and reparations and so forth is really important. And Lakmini also mentioned this in her research paper, that you cannot look at this as just a technical conversation. This really is about the inequities that has been generated by an insufficient distribution of power and privilege. And if you don't tackle that issue, you won't really reach the core of the difficulties that some of the global North countries are encountering in giving up, which essentially is what the ask is, in giving up some of this power and privilege, which is necessary to move the system to a better place. And again, that's why the engagement of the Global South and the coalitions across the Global South are so incredibly important, because once the voices are united, there's a much stronger, much better opportunity and possibility of moving the needle and setting demands that Global South coalitions will not back down from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you so much for sharing the response. In the interest of time, I think it's time to move on to the Q&A session. Thank you so much for leaving your thoughts and questions in the chat box. I've seen some already. There's in fact 2 questions for Aline, so I think I'm going to start with you, Aline. So first question is coming from B. Cavello. For Aline, what do you see as strategies that are effective for shifting the mindsets or behaviors of those financiers or governments? What do they want or need that could help them change behavior or priorities?
Thank you very much for the questions. Just before address, I would like to comment that here now in Brazil, we are working very much with 2 fronts about financing development. One in the BRICS context, that it's being prepared a document with innovative financial mechanisms. And I think that at the end of this year, BRICS will deliver this document produced by the BTTNF, the network of think tanks, trying to produce to what is innovative in financing development in all those countries. So I think it will be a very important document. And the other is about COP30. Some people talking about the climate agenda, so it's very important. It's about reparations also from the global north. It's about, we are already spending very much in mitigation and adaptation, where we have problems of adaptation, very severe problems. So we are spending very much about this. So all the discussions about financing the climate target, the climate financial target. So this is very important for us now. And this is very important question about how we can deliver more and financing priorities in health. I think that health infrastructure is important. We should make it better because it's different. Some communities in Brazil, we have municipalities that are very good in health assistance with community participation, and others that are not very, very good. So we have to fight these inequalities also in health access. But the app development is fine. We have a SUS app, everyone now have. We have a very big program on digital government in Brazil. So almost everyone has these apps. I think that the government also produces important apps and everybody uses. I think this is not the problem. And human resources, it's like infrastructure. Some municipalities, we have very good doctors. That's why we have this program, more doctors. because some municipalities don't have, they are far from the big centers. People don't want to go there, and so the government has to enhance the incentives for the doctors go to some areas. And on human resources, it's also, we have something that we have to balance. I don't want to take a long time, but I think that these things are very important. But also, I've been working in industry ministry, and there's a great preoccupation about the production of the vaccines, equipments, and things that we need. And sometimes we are very dependent on other sources, external sources. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aline, for your answers. Daniel, yeah, go ahead. You would like to add something?
Yeah, I want to quickly respond to the question on someone raised a question on the app, that if a digital system is used, there is already a digital divide. So will the people be able to use them? Or then the last part, the person said, is it earth infrastructure, app development, or human resource? Which one should come first? Now, the answer to that, from my perspective, is that the app that was used, for example, in Brazil, was not used by everyone. It was the earth workers that used it to conduct surveillance system, right? So in an emergency situations, workers that are working can leverage on digital technology to get real-time information. Because, for example, at this stage, we are talking about disease outbreak. So real-time surveillance information can be life-saving, because you don't have to leave the rural community you are, where you have gotten information, to come to the city center to brief stakeholders. Stakeholders see your information immediately and collate the result from all the communities and respond real-time. So it was not really given to local community persons, but the officers that are working. Of course, again, it
Dr.
now
J, yeah.
depends on the
Dr.
setting.
J,
Thank you.
sorry. Thank you so much. Sorry for having to cut you short, because we're running out of time. It is a very interesting discussion that we have today. We have so many questions, so many interesting insights. I think I'm gonna go with the last question. I'm gonna address this to Lakmini to close, and then afterwards we're gonna wrap up. So, Lakmini, this question is directed to you. Your recommendations require transforming the global financial system. What specific role should global South governments play to drive this transformation? Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. Actually, from my point of view and from my country experience, what I need to share is that it's the most important thing is national government's readiness. So before we go into the regional or the international platforms, as national governments, we need to understand, we need to improve our capacity, because it is the public sector who handle this debt, because I'm talking about the debt sustainability. So we need to have our systems in place, and we need to understand what is happening because there are some concerns about colonialism, the imperialism. I have even discussed those things in my paper as well. So when I'm listening to Julie, I feel like before we are going to the international level, as national governments, we need to be ready with our things. We need to do our homework well. Unless otherwise, we need to nod our head to each and everything that comes from the outside. So first, it is very important to make our systems robust before we are like challenging, or if we wanted to transform the international level, we need to build our capacity, the research capacity, and this should be a continuous process. So that's my final sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lakmini. That's like on point and on time as well. Thank you to everyone who participated today. It was a great discussion. Thank you for sharing your energy. Thank you for sharing your insights today. Before we close, I just want to highlight 3 takeaways. So, first, that the Global South perspectives are essential for addressing global challenges. And today we have heard the examples from the presentation by Lakmini and Denine. Because Global South perspectives provide context-specific analysis and solutions grounded in lived realities, offering innovative approaches that can inform global strategies. Second, these community-based solutions in the Global South have demonstrated effectiveness and inclusive interventions, but scaling impact requires systemic change through multi-sectoral collaboration, bringing government, civil society, private sectors, and also international partners. And most critically, scaling means that it also needs funding. And the third, to achieve common goals, we also must continue advocating that governments across the Global South should direct that towards financing projects aligned with development priorities such as infrastructure and social services like health and education, as we discussed today. Let's work together to ensure that this evidence is recognized and heard. Attending this event is just the first step, and we can continue sharing, discussing, and keep amplifying these messages in our individual or collaborative work. I am inviting you to attend our upcoming Southern Voice Talks on the 25th of September on the issue of security. And thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for coming to the Southern Voice First Talk. Bye.